Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into a story that's just, well, it's got everything. Domestic perfection, billions of dollars, a really dramatic fall from grace, and honestly, one of the most surprising comebacks you can imagine. Think about that image, right? The perfectly styled pie, the immaculate garden, just total cultivated elegance.
The epitome of good things.
Exactly. And then contrast that really sharply with that other image we all remember, the one of her emerging from prison in that very distinctive handmade poncho.
That contrast really does capture the whole art, doesn't it?
It really does. And that journey with those incredible highs and dramatic lows is what we're exploring today. We're taking a deep dive into the remarkable and, often turbulent career of Martha Stewart.
And we're using that stack of sources you mentioned, articles, research reports. It's all here.
Right. And it's more than just, a biography. It feels like a masterclass in entrepreneurial vision, the incredible power and maybe vulnerability of personal branding, facing a huge crisis and showing just extraordinary resilience, almost unprecedented, really.
Yeah, the resilience factor is huge in her story.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to go beyond just the timeline. We want to pull out the most important nuggets from all this material, the surprising facts, the strategy decisions happening behind the scenes, maybe those aha moments that aren't obvious at first glance.
Those bits that really explain how.
Exactly. How she built this massive empire, why it nearly crumbled, to the weight of scandal and legal trouble, and then precisely how she engineered this comeback that somehow keeps her incredibly relevant, even today, decades later.
Fascinating.
Consider this your kind of in-depth shortcut to understanding a truly unique, really complex figure in American business and culture.
And what's really interesting, as these sources really dig into, is how her story isn't just a business case study. It's, like you said, a cultural phenomenon. It's deeply tied into how we think about home and work and success and public image. The sources don't just give us dates and events. They paint this really detailed picture of someone who didn't just build a company. She meticulously crafted an aspirational lifestyle.
And a powerful personal brand around it.
That aspirational piece is key.
Absolutely. And we'll see how she faced this almost unimaginable public downfall, right? And then, maybe the most surprising part, how she leveraged those experiences, sometimes in really unexpected ways, to not just rebuild, but to fundamentally redefine her influence and connect with totally new audiences. We'll be looking for those insights hidden in the layers. Exactly. It's a story with really distinct acts.
Yeah.
So we've got to start at the beginning, right? The ascent. How did she even cultivate these good things and build that billion-dollar brand in the first place?
Yes, and to really get that, we absolutely have to look beyond just the label she often got, homemaker. Sometimes it was used almost dismissively,
Right, like it wasn't serious business.
Exactly. But the sources make it incredibly clear. Martha Stewart was a genuinely transformative figure. She took this traditional realm, homemaking, cooking, gardening, decorating, entertaining stuff often seen as, unpaid labor.
Or just women's work.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And she didn't just professionalize it, she elevated it. She turned it into this sophisticated, aspirational lifestyle brand, something to be celebrated, studied, invested in.
Yeah, the sources mentioned she wasn't just showing people how to. She became America's most trusted lifestyle expert, like the go-to teacher for millions on basically every part of daily living.
And what's so significant about that, a key insight here, is how she fundamentally challenged the perceptions of domesticity. Like we said, unpaid labor, routine chores, largely invisible economically. Stewart reframed it. She presented it as needing real creativity, deep expertise, meticulous skill, aesthetic vision.
So she gave it value, economic value almost.
In a huge way. By doing that, she wasn't just selling magazines or products. She was, maybe without fully intending it at first, pioneering the whole concept of the lifestyle influencer and the creator economy way before we had those terms, way before the internet, really.
That's a great point. She was the original influencer.
She really was. She showed that these traditional domains, often just seen as private sphere stuff, could be leveraged into significant, visible, economically powerful businesses. It was groundbreaking. It laid the foundation for so many others in the lifestyle space.
That idea, transforming traditional domains into economic power, that still resonates so much today, doesn't it? Makes you think about skills learned outside of a typical job.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing value wherever it exists.
So where did it all begin for her? Let's rewind to the foundations. Her early life, those unexpected turns the sources talk about. Born Martha Helen Kostera, Nutley, New Jersey, 1941. Second of 6 kids, Polish-American family.
And the sources note she developed this real can-do spirit early on. Self-reliance, determination. Seems like it was baked in from the start.
Yeah, that can-do spirit feels foundational looking at everything she did later.
Absolutely. Her mother, who was a teacher, meticulously taught her all those essential domestic arts, cooking, baking, canning, sewing, skills she was honing from a really young age.
And her dad, a pharmaceutical salesman, introduced her to gardening when she was just 3. That's incredible.
Right. It wasn't just casual exposure. It was deep, hands-on immersion in DIY skills, self-sufficiency, and that meticulous attention to detail that became her brand's hallmark.
And you see those early entrepreneurial signs even as a kid. The sources mention her babysitting for the kids of Yankees players nearby Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra,
Can you imagine babysitting for Yogi Berra's kids?
and organizing parties for their kids when she was only 10. Already showing that flair for organization, for hosting.
It definitely shows that early inclination towards business, service, seeing opportunities. But what's really fascinating and crucial for understanding her unique foundation are the turns she took before the lifestyle brand fully locked in.
Right, like the modeling.
Exactly. She was striking, and she modeled professionally from age 13 right through college. Ads for big names, Clairol, Lifebuoy, Unilever. That gave her early exposure to media, branding, visual presentation, huge later on.
And then, after Barnard, she got a degree in history and architectural history in '62. She makes this completely sharp, unexpected turn. Wall Street.
Yes, from 1967 to 1973, she worked as a stockbroker. Monis, Williams, and Seidel, later Salomon Brothers. The sources describe it as demanding, high pressure, and very male-dominated back then.
That is just not the image most people have, is it? The domestic guru on the Wall Street trading floor.
Not at all, but it was absolutely foundational. It gave her this incredible blend of skills.
It's such a wild mix, that deep creativity and domestic skill combined with high finance. How did that actually blend together for her?
Well, that's the magic, isn't it? That blend of deep, practical, domestic skills, honed since childhood, and then 6 years immersed in the intense, analytical, strategic world of Wall Street. It created this truly unique foundation.
Mm-hmm.
The sources explicitly say that stockbroker experience gave her crucial early business training and a deep understanding of finance, market dynamics, risk assessment, strategic planning.
Okay, so it wasn't just about having good taste.
Not even close. It was combining that aesthetic vision with sharp business acumen, financial savvy, and knowing how to build and scale something. That juxtaposition of skills is what let her build something much bigger than just, a catering business or a cookbook later on.
Right.
It showed that these feminine domains could become huge economic powerhouses if you paired them with serious business expertise.
And that catering business really is where the visible brand starts to take shape. Sources say she moved to Westport, Connecticut in 1972 after leaving Wall Street. Started restoring that 1805 farmhouse, Turkey Hill.
And Turkey Hill itself became part of the brand, right? It was the model for her TV studio sets later. That integration of her real life and the brand started early.
Yeah, that's interesting. So she launches the catering business from her basement in '76.
Her basement kitchen, yeah. And it apparently gained acclaim really quickly, specifically for gourmet menus and unique creative presentation.
Ah, the presentation again?
Always the presentation. The sources highlight her remarkable talent and originality. Not just the food quality, but the visual aspect, the elegant plating, the meticulous event design details, things that became so central to the Martha Stewart identity.
So it wasn't just about yummy food. It was the whole aesthetic package deal.
Exactly. It wasn't just a hobby turn a business. It was defined by that unique visual presentation and the gourmet menus. A clear focus on quality, aesthetics, and standing out from the crowd from day one.
It grew fast.
Very fast. Within a decade, that basement operation turned into a highly profitable $1 million business, serving high-profile corporate clients, celebrities, building her reputation among an influential crowd.
Wow. Turning a passion like cooking and hosting into a $1 million business just by intensely focusing on quality, aesthetics, being different. That's a powerful lesson right there for anyone starting something.
It really is. Focus and differentiation.
So from catering success, she makes the leap into media. Sources point to that key moment, catering a book party for her then-husband's publishing company. She meets Alan Merkin, head of Crown Publishing.
And Merkin was just blown away by the food, the presentation, her whole organizational vibe. He commissions her to do a cookbook.
Which goes entertaining. 1982.
An instant, massive bestseller, sold hundreds of thousands of copies. It genuinely made her a household name, launching her way beyond catering into national recognition.
And that book was just the start, wasn't it? She became incredibly prolific.
Prolific doesn't even cover it. Entertaining was the first of, 77 books she eventually published? Many, many bestsellers across all sorts of lifestyle topics. Books became a core pillar of her content empire.
And that success in publishing quickly led to even bigger media plays.
Absolutely. Leveraging that reputation, 1990, she launches her flagship magazine, Martha Stewart Living, initially with Time Publishing Ventures. She was editor-in-chief, keeping tight creative control.
The sources call it an immediate success, and they say it basically pioneered that whole lifestyle, glossy magazine genre we know today. Homemaking, cooking, crafts, gardening, home projects, all with that high-quality, aspirational look.
Its popularity was huge, so naturally it led to a companion TV show in '93, also called Martha Stewart Living. Started as weekly half-hour, but demand was so high it quickly went to a daily hour-long show.
The quick jump from print to TV, that feels very deliberate, strategic.
Oh, absolutely. Broaden the reach, reinforce the brand across platforms.
Yeah.
Very smart.
And she didn't stop with just her own media. The sources mentioned strategic partnerships expanding her reach even further, like that Kmart deal.
Right. The Kmart partnership, signed around '97, that was huge. Reportedly worth $5 million initially, led to the whole Martha Stewart everyday line.
And that was crucial for, what did the sources say, democratizing good taste.
Exactly. Her line of affordable but stylish housewares, bedding, bath stuff, paint colors at Kmart, it disrupted retail. It put elegance on shelves nationwide. It brought her aesthetic to millions who maybe weren't buying the expensive books or watching the cable show.
That must have been a fascinating balancing act, though, keeping that upscale image while partnering with the mass market retailer like Kmart.
For sure. The sources suggest it was a calculated risk, but it paid off big time in reach and revenue. Massively expanded her brand's footprint, even if some purists maybe raised an eyebrow about diluting the high-end vibe.
Showed her business pragmatism.
Definitely. And she kept publishing, too, launching Martha Stewart Weddings magazine in '93, segmenting the market, capitalizing on different life moments.
Wow. Okay, so she wasn't just writing books or doing TV shows. She was building this whole integrated media and retail ecosystem.
That's the key analysis right there.
Yeah.
The brilliant strategy behind diversifying across all these channels, books, magazines, TV, and then forging those massive retail partnerships. Kmart was a masterstroke for hitting a mass audience. This wasn't random. It was a deliberate, integrated push to reach people everywhere, maximize the brand's potential, and make all the different parts work together. Synergy.
And it all built towards that peak moment, what the sources call the Omnimedia vision and IPO. September 1997, she formalizes it all by founding Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia, MSLO.
Yes, the big corporate umbrella. Her business partner, Sharon Patrick, was key here, brought crucial financial and strategic expertise, helped get funding. The goal was crystal clear: consolidate everything. TV, print, merchandise, the early digital stuff, all under one roof.
And Stewart was firmly in charge.
Chairwoman, president, CEO. The objective, the sources say, was explicitly to promote synergy between all the parts and gain greater control of the brand's direction by owning the whole ecosystem.
And they pioneered this innovative omnimedia approach. The sources describe it as a solar system with content at the center.
Yeah, isn't that a great description? The core was high-quality, practical, aspirational lifestyle content. And the idea, radical for its time, was develop this content once, then leverage it, cross-promote it, monetize it across every platform: magazines, TV, books, products, the website.
So the research for a magazine article could fuel a TV segment, inspire a product.
Exactly. Creative teams worked across segments, applying expertise universally. This created brand consistency and efficiencies of scale. Hugely innovative and efficient. It basically anticipated the media convergence and cross-platform strategies we see everywhere now, especially with digital content and influencers.
She and Patrick basically created the blueprint for modern media companies and direct-to-consumer brands built on content.
They really did maximize the IP, maximize the brand equity.
And the market responded.
Yeah.
The IPO validated this whole integrated model in a massive way.
A truly massive way. MSLO had this highly anticipated, incredibly successful IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, October 19, 1999, right before the dot-com bubble really peaked. Stock price at $18 a share. Huge anticipation.
And the sources say the price just skyrocketed right at the opening bell.
Oh, yeah. surged over 95% on day one, reached as high as $38, maybe even $39.75, generated incredible buzz, raised nearly $130 million for the company. And for Martha herself, well, it cemented her status as a titan.
Because she held most of the shares, right?
Exactly. As founder and chairwoman, she had a huge stake. Sources say her voting shares were somewhere between 60 and 96%. At the closing price on IPO day, her personal stake was valued at $1.2 billion.
Making her the first self-made female billionaire in the U.S.
The first. What a journey.
Just an absolutely extraordinary rise. From a basement catering business to a billion-dollar public company and self-made billionaire status.
Well, it's unparalleled, really. The company's market value peaked shortly after, around $1.7 to $1.8 billion in 1999-2000, profits over $21 million, sales over $285 million by 2000. The IPO success wasn't just about money, it was the market shouting, yes, this integrated Omnimedia model works. This brand is immensely powerful.
It validated the whole ecosystem she'd built.
Absolutely. It was a strategic masterstroke that saw where media was going and maximized her brand equity like few others could have back then.
So that's the absolute peak, the incredible ascent. But then came part two, the precipice. Yeah. The scandal that threatened to bring it all crashing down.
A very sharp, very public precipice right at the apex of her success and public adoration. Boom. This legal controversy hits starting in December 2001.
This was the ImClone stock trading thing. According to the sources, let's lay out exactly what happened, clearly.
The core event was a stock sale.
Yeah.
Stewart sold nearly 4,000 shares of ImClone Systems, a biotech company, on December 27th, 2001.
And the timing was everything.
Absolutely critical. She sold just one day before the FDA publicly announced it had rejected ImClone's big new cancer drug, Erbitux. When that news hit on December 28th, ImClone stock tanked, dropped over 16% in a day.
And the allegation was that she knew that bad news was coming, that she acted on insider information.
That was the core allegation, yes. The sequence, as laid out in the sources and court docs, was crucial. Samuel Waxel, ImClone CEO, also a friend of Stewart's, found out internally on December 26th that the FDA rejection was coming.
Before the public knew.
Right. He and his daughter tried to dump their shares immediately. That raised red flags. Stewart's stockbroker at Merrill Lynch was Peter Bakanovich. He also handled Waxel's account. Bakanovich's assistant, Douglas Faneuil, allegedly got tipped off about the Waxels trying to sell because of the bad news.
And Faneuil then contacts Stewart.
Yes. Sources say Faneuil passed a message to Stewart's assistant, something like, Peter Bakanovich thinks ImClone is going to start trading downward. Stewart, who was on vacation, reportedly directed the sale of her shares after getting that message.
Okay. And the prosecution argued that based on that non-public heads-up, basically a warning from inside the ImClone broker circle, she sold to avoid taking a loss.
Correct. They figured she avoided a loss of somewhere between $45,000 and $51,000 by selling before the public announcement.
And her defense was?
Stewart and Bakanovich maintained the sale was totally innocent. They claimed there's a pre-existing agreement to sell her shares if the price dropped below $60. But investigators couldn't find any record of that stop-loss order. And on top of that, as the investigation got going, she was accused of trying to alter a phone message from Bakanovich about the sale and, crucially, lying to federal investigators about why she sold and the timing.
So the mess involved the sale itself, the super suspicious timing, and then, critically, how she handled the investigation and what she told the feds.
Exactly. And it was that response, her alleged actions and statements during the investigation, that became the absolute central focus of the legal fight that followed.
The sources detail the investigation leading to a federal grand jury indictment in June 2003. 9 counts, including securities fraud, obstruction of justice,
conspiracy, making false statements.
Yes, serious list. The securities fraud charge was particularly nasty because it was based on her public statements of innocence. Prosecutors argued those statements were meant to deceive MSLO investors and prop up the company's stock, which had tanked when the scandal broke.
And she pleaded not guilty to all of it.
Yep. Set the stage for a very, very public trial.
Which started January 2004. The sources call it an absolute media sensation. 6.5 weeks. Captured everyone's attention.
But here's the thing that's absolutely crucial to understand, and the sources really hammer this because it gets misremembered all the time. Martha Stewart was not convicted of insider trading itself.
Right. That's key. The judge actually dismissed the most serious charge, securities fraud, midway through the trial.
He did. Ruled there just wasn't enough evidence that she lied specifically to influence MSLO's stock price.
So if it wasn't insider trading, what was she found guilty of by the jury? March 5th, 2004, the verdict came down. Guilty on 4 counts, all related to her conduct during the investigation. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of making false statements to federal investigators.
Lying to the feds.
Exactly. The prosecution, led by James Comey at the time, was very explicit afterwards. They said the case was fundamentally about lying.
That distinction is incredibly important. It wasn't the stock trade itself, which might have been hard to prove legally as insider trading for her.
Right, because of the whole fiduciary duty issue. She didn't have the same legal obligation to imclone shareholders as an executive would. Proving classic insider trading was tricky.
So the government focused on her actions after the question started impeding the investigation.
Absolutely. And this is a critical insight from the sources. The focus shifted squarely to her response. It became a landmark case, not just in celebrity justice, but in showing that obstructing justice, trying to cover things up, can bring down the hammer, sometimes harder than the original alleged offense.
Especially when the original offense, in terms of money saved, seemed relatively small, $51K.
Exactly. That disparity sparked huge debate. Was it prosecutorial overreach? Were insider trading laws just arbitrarily enforced, especially against a high-profile woman? It highlights the intense pressure public figures are under. Your response to an investigation can totally determine your fate, sometimes more than the initial issue itself.
And the consequences for her were severe. Sentencing came next.
July 16th, 2004. The judge gave her 5 months in federal prison, then 5 months of home confinement ankle bracelet, and all plus 2 years supervised probation, and a $30,000 fine for the criminal conviction.
And later there was the SEC settlement too.
Yeah, August 2006, she settled the civil insider trading charges with the Securities and Exchange Commission. That meant paying about $195,000 in fines and penalties, and crucially, being barred from serving as a director or CEO of a public company for 5 years.
She actually went to prison, starting October 8, 2004, minimum security place in West Virginia.
Alderson, yeah. Sometimes called Camp Cupcake, but still, federal prison. A significant loss of freedom no matter the conditions. She was released March 4, 2005.
What was the impact on her company, MSLO, through all this chaos?
It was really complex and kind of paradoxical in some ways. When she was indicted in June 2003, she resigned as CEO and chairwoman to protect the company, though she stayed on the board as chief creative officer. The stock initially plummeted on the news. Uncertainty, you know.
But then came that bizarre market reaction the sources highlight. MSLO's stock climbed dramatically, even quadrupled while she was actually in prison. Soared like 90% by her release. That makes no sense.
It's totally counterintuitive, right? The face of the brand is incarcerated, and the stock rallies. The sources suggest a few reasons. 1, dismissing the securities fraud charge removed that direct legal threat to the company's financials. 2, maybe a sympathy factor. Loyal fans sticking by, or maybe just increased interest due to the drama.
Or maybe investors thought the underlying business was solid.
That's the third idea. Belief in the strength of the assets. The magazines, the TV library, the products, the Omnimedia model itself, independent of her day-to-day presence. Maybe it was seen as undervalued after the initial plunge. Whatever drove it, the rally suggested the market, at that specific moment, believed the core business could survive, maybe even thrive, without her direct leadership, or maybe they anticipated her return would boost value.
But even with that rally, the stock never got back to its peak levels.
No, it remained significantly below those pre-indictment highs.
And her personal net worth bounced around too, briefly back to billionaire status during that rally, but then dropped sharply after release to maybe $550 million as the stock fell back.
Right, and the company itself, MSLO, once valued near $2 billion, eventually got sold years later. First to Sequential Brands in 2015 for a much lower price, around $350 million. Then sold again to Marquee Brands in 2019 for even less, maybe $175 to $215 million. She stayed involved, kept a stake, but that peak corporate value was gone.
That whole sequence, the drop, the weird rally, the eventual sale at a fraction of the peak, what does that tell us about the link between a huge personal brand and the actual business assets?
It shows a really complex, sometimes contradictory relationship. Her personal image was the brand, undeniably central to its stratospheric success, and her tarnished image clearly hurt the stock initially.
The rally suggests?
It suggests the market saw value in the underlying assets, the model itself, separate from her personal conduct. Or maybe it was the sympathy thing. or belief in resilience. And getting rid of that securities fraud charge definitely helped. So it highlights that difference between a founder's personal behavior and the perceived fundamental value of the business they built, even if that value ultimately decreased significantly from the IPO boom days. It's a case study in how personal crises hit corporate value in weird ways.
And throughout all this, public perception of Martha Stewart was just incredibly divided, right? Polarized.
Intensely. Even before the scandal, her image, that steely perfectionism, sometimes seen as aggressively ruthless in business, she wasn't universally adored. She was already polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
The trial just cranked that polarization up to 11, turned her into this massive media sensation, publicly scrutinized, grilled, condemned by many, often gleefully. For a lot of people, sadly, she became primarily known for her downfall.
And that whole debate about whether her prosecution was fair seems like a big part of the reaction.
Absolutely. Sources highlight that many people felt she was unfairly targeted. Celebrity justice, singled out because she was famous, maybe prosecuted harder than male execs at other scandal-hit companies who did arguably worse things.
Some even called her a political prisoner.
Yeah, suggesting authorities wanted to make an example of her. Plus, the feeling that insider trading laws themselves were complex, maybe arbitrarily enforced, fueled the debate about her specific prosecution being fair.
But not everyone saw her as a victim.
Right. No, definitely not. Others felt her quiet composure during the trial, her stoicism actually earned admiration, saw her as resilient, maintaining dignity under immense pressure. So it wasn't one single reaction. It was fractured, often reflecting how people already felt about her success and personality.
It's interesting, the sources mentioned that even in the IPO filing back in '99, MSLO warned that her reputation being tarnished was a risk. They knew the brand was vulnerable, being so tied to one person.
They did. The scandal proved just how vulnerable. But the complex market reaction, the public debate, it also showed this enduring, almost personal connection many people felt to her brand. Even controversy, weirdly, could fuel engagement. Maybe morbid curiosity at first, but engagement nonetheless.
Okay, let's quickly run through those key dates from the table in the sources again. It really puts the timeline of the scandal in focus.
Sure. So major events related to the ImClone case. December 27, 2001, Stewart sells her ImClone shares. December 28, 2001, FDA rejection announced, stock plummets. June 4, 2003, federal indictment on 9 counts, securities fraud, obstruction, etc. SEC files civil suit. January 20, 2004, criminal trial begins, media frenzy. March 5, 2004, jury verdict. Guilty on conspiracy, obstruction, lying to investigators, acquitted of securities fraud. July 16, 2004, sentencing, 5 months prison, 5 months home confinement, probation, fine. October 8, 2004, begins prison sentence in Alderson, WV, March 4, 2005, released from prison, MSLO stock had quadrupled during her sentence. August 7, 2006, settles SEC civil charges, $195K penalty, 5-year officer director ban.
That table really lays it out. Transaction to indictment to conviction to prison.
Yeah.
And clearly reinforces the conviction was for lying and obstruction, not the trade itself.
Exactly. That's the key legal takeaway.
So she's out of prison March 2005. The huge question that is, how do you even start to come back from that? Sort of public damaging ordeal.
Yeah.
Which brings us neatly to part 3. The Phoenix Rises reinvention, resilience, and the enduring influence.
And the sources make it crystal clear. She wasted 0 time. No wallowing, no retreating. The moment she was released, March 4th, 2005, the comeback plan kicked into gear. That can-do spirit again, but focused on personal and brand recovery this time.
And her immediate move was back to media, right?
Yeah.
Using the platforms that built her fame in the first place.
Yes, that was the most direct path back to her audience. Within months, she was back on TV. New daily talk show, The Martha Stewart Show, premiered September 2005. Syndicated, so broad reach. She also did The Apprentice. Martha Stewart, though that reality show was less successful.
The sources mentioned she wasn't thrilled with the talk show format, preferred her classic how-to style.
Yeah, apparently so. But she did it. And while maybe not her favorite, those initial shows were a massive accomplishment, according to the sources. Why? Because they stabilized her personal career and, crucially, helped stabilize MSLO financially during a really critical period.
Just showing she was back, actively producing content.
Exactly. And alongside TV, she pushed out a bunch of new books aimed at re-engaging her audience, showing her expertise was still top-notch. The Martha Rules on Business Strategy, big comprehensive guides like the Baking Handbook, the Homekeeping Handbook.
So an immediate, aggressive return to creating content across platforms, TV, books, that was vital.
Absolutely vital. Re-establish presence, demonstrate productivity, signal the brand and her were back. active, creating. It was totally rooted in her core belief. Content drives everything.
Rebuilding public trust, though.
Yeah.
That must have been a colossal task after the trial, the conviction, prison.
Huge challenge, and it involved a very deliberate strategic shift in her public image. Sources note she consciously brought in more humor, showed a more relaxed attitude, worked to reveal a more relatable side than that sometimes rigid perfectionist image of the past.
And she didn't hide from it. She made prison jokes,
Yeah.
used self-deprecating humor in appearances.
That was key to the humanization strategy. Seems counterintuitive, maybe, but by acknowledging it, even satirizing it sometimes, she kind of disarmed critics. Showed self-awareness, resilience.
Some of her comments about prison being like a college campus were controversial, though, weren't they?
They were, yeah. Maybe downplayed the reality of incarceration for many, but they also showed this defiant resilience, let her control the narrative somewhat, reframe the experience. And crucially, she also leveraged her time inside more meaningfully, mentoring inmates, teaching skills, later becoming an advocate for prison reform.
And that image of her leaving prison in the crocheted poncho made by an inmate, that became instantly iconic.
Incredibly powerful, symbolic, not just fashion. It signaled solidarity, subtly highlighted the potential and humanity inside prisons. Remember, her pre-scandal image was often steely, ruthless, not warm and fuzzy. But the crisis forced a shift. By embracing humor, vulnerability, even strategic vulnerability, acknowledging the past, making light of it sometimes, she turned potential shame into a story of resilience, survival, self-awareness. This strategic humanization helped reconnect with audiences, old and new, who respected her grit and saw a more approachable side.
It really shows how a crisis, while awful, can weirdly be a chance to make a brand, especially a personal one, feel more authentic, more relatable, if you handle it right.
It's a masterclass in reputation management, leveraging crisis for reinvention. Sometimes showing vulnerability and resilience, even with humor, rebuilds trust better than pretending perfection was never broken.
What about the business itself, MSLO? How did it fare after her comeback started?
MSLO showed resilience too, back to profitability within about a year of her release. Stewart gradually ramped up her involvement, rejoined the board in 2011, became chairwoman again in 2012.
Even though the company eventually got sold.
Right. As we said, market value never fully recovered, sold to Sequential in 2015, then Marquee in 2019. But crucially, she stayed involved as chief creative officer, kept significant stake in the brand assets. Her name, her vision, still drove the products and content regardless of who owned the corporate shell.
And she absolutely kept adapting, embracing new media. That original Omnimedia vision was still there, just evolving constantly.
Absolutely. She knew, followed the audience. Launched a weekly call-in show on Sirius Satellite Radio, which became its own channel, Martha Stewart Living Radio on Sirius XM, direct interaction.
She was early on digital too, right? Website back in '97?
Yeah, website, catalog business way back, later a blog network. And more recently, she's been incredibly active, successful on platforms like Twitter and TikTok.
Where her authentic and sometimes unfiltered content really clicks with younger audiences, surprisingly.
Yes. That's a key insight into her continued relevance. She's engaging new demographics on their turf, speaking their digital language, often with that dry wit, that unexpected relatability. She launched her first podcast, the Martha Stewart Podcast, in 2022, Intimate Conversations. And in 2022, 3 new shows on the Roku channel, Martha Gardens, Martha Cooks, Martha Holidays, partnering with new streaming players.
And beyond media, she hugely diversified her product lines after prison.
Tremendously. Knew the value of getting the brand into people's homes, their lives. Big partnership with Macy's in 2007, upscale housewares, bedding, bath. Reportedly Macy's biggest brand launch ever at the time.
And collaborations with Lowe's, Home Depot, Sears, Walmart.
Paints with Lowe's, home goods across the board, reaching different price points, different retailers.
And she moved into totally new, sometimes unexpected categories too.
Definitely showing adaptability, willingness to experiment, lines of wine, fresh and frozen foods, tons of stuff on QVC apparel, culinary, gardening, home, even ventured into CBD products, saw that market growing, and meal kit delivery with Martha and Marley Spoon hitting that convenience trend.
That relentless adaptation and diversification across every media channel, every product category, seems absolutely fundamental to why she stayed relevant for so long.
It's more than fundamental. It's her core principle for longevity. A masterclass in strategic brand extension, staying relevant in markets that change constantly. She doesn't just watch trends, she actively adapts her brand, content, products to meet new platforms, new consumer behaviors, new needs. It's active evolution.
And speaking of adapting and reaching totally new, unexpected audiences, we have to talk about Snoop Dogg, possibly the most surprising, maybe most impactful part of her later comeback.
This is maybe the most iconic piece of her modern relevance story. That unlikely chemistry, right? First popped up when Snoop guested on the Martha Stewart show back in 2008. It felt real and hilarious. Then it exploded into that super popular VH1 show, Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party, Emmy-nominated even.
You just couldn't imagine a less likely pairing. How did that partnership actually impact her brand, her image?
Hugely. Sources point out it introduced her to a completely new audience, younger, broader, way more diverse than her traditional base. It was massive in helping redefine her image from that sometimes rigid perfectionist to someone cool, unexpected, genuinely funny with a sense of humor.
Someone who could hang with Snoop Dogg.
Exactly. It showed she could poke fun at herself, embrace an irreverent side. That resonated with people who maybe only knew her from the trial headlines. It completely shattered preconceptions.
Yeah, it really did.
Sources specifically call it an example of her unapologetic leadership, her willingness to try irreverent marketing others would avoid. It proved her capacity for continuous reinvention, sustained cultural relevance way beyond her original niche. She's the original influencer, a master of evolving.
And her recent stuff keeps proving it, appearing on the Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover at 81 in May 2023.
Generated massive buzz, solidified that cultural relevance in a totally unexpected arena again. Another strategic, attention-grabbing move. Showcased confidence, challenged age stereotypes, put her back in the headlines for something totally new.
And she's still working constantly into her 80s, judging on Chopped, her Martha Knows Best gardening show, all these ventures.
Tireless. And it all seems to circle back to that core philosophy the sources mentioned she still lives by. Inspiration goes with information. Practical guidance fuels creative ideas. Content was always the most important thing. The knowledge is the product. Providing useful how-to information, educational content, that's the foundation.
And her philosophy for this incredible, decades-long run.
Sources quote her saying it's rooted in evolution, constantly learning, adapting, paying attention to culture, to audiences. And, maybe surprisingly, being authentic, showing a genuine, even if curated, self. She talks about trying to sense a void in the culture and then fill it with content or products. She doesn't just follow trends, she tries to create it, anticipating needs, finding new ways to connect. Her longevity, especially after everything she went through, powerfully proves that mastery, a clear message, and that willingness to evolve and engage everywhere, it never expires. She's not just some entrepreneur from the past. She's like a prototype for the modern creator economy. Shows how a strong core brand, built on expertise and adaptability, can transcend generations, tech shifts, maintain relevance for a lifetime.
What an absolutely extraordinary, resilient journey. Building an empire from domestic passion and sharp business sense, hitting billionaire status, pioneering a new media model, then that dramatic public fall convicted for lying and obstruction, and then engineering this truly remarkable comeback through strategic reinvention, continuous adaptation across everything.
It is a powerful narrative, forged in adversity, absolutely. Her story, laid out in these sources, offers some really key broader lessons, way beyond just lifestyle brands. First, obviously, the immense power of a personal brand. A strong, trusted one is a huge asset, can connect deeply, survive damage, fuel multiple ventures.
Second, the critical importance of strategic diversification and adaptability. Her original Omnimedia vision was so ahead of its time, and her continued embrace of new tech, new platforms, new partners, Kmart to TikTok to Snoop Dogg, shows how vital continuous evolution is. Meeting your audience wherever they are in changing markets.
Third, the profound power of resilience and reinvention. Her ability not just to survive such a public hit, but to actively reconstruct her image, rebuild her career, even boost her relatability through vulnerability and humor. That's a compelling case study. Setbacks aren't the end. With strategy and determination, they can be catalysts for growth, reinvention, even connecting with new audiences by showing unexpected sides.
And finally, her enduring influence. She's still a cultural icon, a teacher, a groundbreaking entrepreneur, a symbol of aspirational living, even if the image is more complex, more human now. Her legacy isn't just democratizing good taste or building an empire. It's also proving that passion, discipline, strategy, and just incredible resilience can build and even rebuild an empire, even after facing profound public adversity.
Her journey really reinforces that resilience isn't just bouncing back to where you were. It's often about adapting, evolving, finding new strength and relevance through the challenges you overcome.
So what can you, listening, take away from this deep dive into Martha Stewart's extraordinary, complex journey? Maybe it's about the importance of constantly adapting in the face of change. Maybe it's the power of having a clear message rooted in real value and expertise. Or maybe, just maybe, is that profoundly reassuring idea that setbacks, even really dramatic public ones, don't actually have to be the end of your story.
Martha Stewart built her empire on useful content, a clear vision. She consistently adapted, found new ways to reach people, even reinvented herself after crisis. As we all navigate our own world, information overload, constant change, where personal brands and content matter more and more, what does her journey teach us about cultivating lasting relevance, whether that's in business or creativity or maybe just in the art of living a genuinely good thing?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.